And we're live. Welcome back, everybody. Dip Catcher Radio back again. Today we'll be talking about a new future for HEX. We're really at a turning point for HEX. Both a couple outside factors and a couple internal factors that set this up for what I think could be the biggest year in HEX since 2021. I commented this on a tweet, but it's really centered around a couple of big tailwinds working in HEX's favor that are converging at the same time. And in this context, when I say HEX, I'm talking specifically about HEX on Ethereum. So I guess the two big tailwinds that are working in favor of HEX that we have to look forward are one, the HEX inflation was just dramatically cut through staking actions taken by the OA. In the past, the stake yield was artificially high because the majority of the supply was owned by the OA and it sat there liquid. So all of the yield that could have gone to that majority of the supply was instead distributed amongst a small percent of the user-owned supply that was staked. And so while the total max inflation experienced by HEX is capped at 3.69% and is even further reduced because inflation that is allocated today is actually realized in the future as T-shares expire. But even with that, the annualized inflation rate was closer to about 11%. And that's just frankly too high. Like the Fed targets 2% inflation. And just overall, it was just too high. And it wasn't such a big deal because in the past, there were really strong bull market trends that were helping to kind of cover that up. And it was, at the time, in 2021, the inflation rate had actually just cut by a factor of 10. So there's something that I like to call the tenthening, which happened after Big Payday, and that's basically just as the inflation that was occurring due to the adoption amplifier, like the original issuance of HEX, that went away, and so that's part of what caused the big run up to the all-time highs in 2021 was that at the end of 2020 there was a massive reduction in the new supply issuance of HEX, and that's what we're seeing again happening right now. So not only does this reduction in the inflation rate of HEX just like positively favor the markets, it also changes what the risk-free rate is in HEX. Because in the past, you could get about 11% for staking for 1 year, and then your APY for a max length stake was closer to 30% in your first year. And those numbers ratchet up over time as old T-shares expire and new ones start at a higher T-share rate. But that risk-free rate in HEX is really important because for other innovations to take place, or any other use case of HEX to take place, it requires that, that's like the benchmark, because staking HEX, when measuring your profit margin in HEX, is virtually risk-free. There's practically no, if you're measuring your performance in HEX, there's no risk to staking, and whatever you earn, that's effectively the risk-free rate. So now that risk-free rate has massively reduced, that actually unleashes a whole new realm of use cases for HEX as an asset. So that's probably the big, the inflation piece. The market, can price that in. But the piece about new use cases for HEX that now become feasible, that's a big deal, and that's really what kind of unlocks, FlexNet as being a major use case for HEX. Is that now that the APY that you earn is so low, like for a max length stake right now, you can get about 4.2% in your first year. But that doesn't come out for, 15 years. But for a 1 year stake, it's only just over 1% APY. for a stake. So now that people, now that like, you know, a year-long stake doesn't, like, that's barely anything. Now people who hold HEX and want to compound it are going to be more open to looking for other protocols that you can do that for. And FlexNet is going to be the home of that, because FlexNet, I'm sure many of you already know by now, it's an L2 that uses HEX as the gas token and as the primary liquidity pair in the native DEX called FlexDEX. You know, and so being the native gas token, any application that's built on FlexNet is going to be a net consumer of HEX in the form of gas. And kind of the culture that we're trying to build around FlexNet is really a culture of innovation. I'd say that in the past, I'd say it peaked in maybe 2022. There's a really strong culture of innovation around HEX. We had Hedron, we had Maximus, we had OSA, you know, we had the Perpetuals, and we had Communists. I think that launched in 2022 as well, maybe 2023. And there's a really strong culture of innovation around HEX. And then I'd say that a lot of that kind of fizzled out in, you know, with the launch of Pulse Chain, because Pulse Chain, you know, I mean, when we look back on it, it kind of cannibalized HEX in a big way. And then the focus in Pulse Chain was more centered around the copies of assets that were made on Pulse Chain when it launched, and then also just like kind of the forked protocols, like just copies of existing protocols on Ethereum. You know, like Pulse is a copy of Ethereum, Pulse X is a copy of PancakeSwap. So it kind of shifted, like, so that culture of innovation, I think, kind of slowed down a little bit. But I think now that there's a low rate environment in HEX, that culture of innovation, it's time to bring it back. Sorry, my focus on my camera is all messed up. Let's see if we can resolve that. There we go. Yeah, so that's really what FlexNet's all about, is leveraging you know, the improved environment for HEX on Ethereum as a way to amplify its growth and provide a catalyst for big breakthrough innovation. The goal of FlexNet is that we want the next cycle's meta trend to emerge from FlexNet. You know, whether, and that doesn't just mean, you know, things that I personally built. That's a core premise of FlexNet, is this ecosystem incubator that we'll be conducting, where if you're a serious builder, serious subject matter expert who wants to build on FlexNet, I will personally go to the ends of the earth with you, you know, providing development support, go-to-market support, you know, design, product, everything that we have been doing the last 8 years. You know, hundreds of millions of dollars of business has been conducted in products that we've launched. We've been through it all. We've tried it all. You know, taken big swings at bat. We've seen what works. We've seen what doesn't work. And so just being able to provide that as a resource for builders, we want to unlock what the next big meta trend is in the crypto space. I don't think that the next meta trend is a copy of last cycle's successful applications. So those are kind of the HEX related tailwinds that are you know, going to help drive HEX into the future. But there's also some broader Ethereum level ones, and this is why FlexNet is built around HEX on Ethereum and not HEX on Pulse Chain. And what that is that over the past, I mean, really, since I first started hearing about these concepts of L2s and rollups and you know, kind of Ethereum scaling solutions, you know, back in like 2017, 2018, you started hearing about this stuff, and all of the upgrades that have happened over the last couple of years in the Ethereum space have been centered around it. Wow, excuse me. And so there have been a couple of big breakthroughs in Ethereum infrastructure that are really enabling all of this to happen with HEX. So one of them is that there is there's over the past 2 years there have been major Ethereum upgrades that have been designed specifically to support the L2 ecosystem as a scaling solution for Ethereum. And so by now there's really solid L2 infrastructure that we can leverage to create FlexNet, which includes how we can use HEX as a custom gas token. There's all this cross-chain interoperability infrastructure related to just ensuring that these L2s can all kind of operate together and operate as an extension of Ethereum. And there's been billions of dollars invested in this infrastructure. And so being able to leverage all that to empower HEX, that's a major kind of convergence. So between HEX having its own positive catalysts, and then with Ethereum, by now, like the L2 as a scaling kind of premise has been, in works for years now and battle tested and has billions of dollars of infrastructure investment. It really is a positive future for HEX, which we really haven't seen in years. The last time things felt really bullish for HEX was in 2020. And I'm starting to get those feelings again, which I haven't. I don't know why my camera is so blurry. Maybe if I put my face here and slowly, yeah, there we go. Let's see what the comments say. Frank says, "Hey, it's Dick Catcher. Hey." P Squared says investor flexing here, but I want your response on this. Response on what? I see the same. Ask away. Bro, why are the GoPulse people trying to scam us in another sack? I heard they either already sold the website or are planning to sell after they collect the sack. Which do you think happens? I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. Probably just trying to, similar to why Richard did the Pulse and PulseX sacrifice. He wanted to capitalize on the success of HEX. He probably felt like he didn't, there was billions of dollars of value created in HEX. And he probably, from the HEX AA, the total amount of ETH that went in was probably around $50 million worth. So he probably felt like he didn't make enough. And so maybe that's similar to GoPulse, is that they feel like they've built a very valuable web property. And then, and so, they want to be able to capitalize. But I'm not as offended. I mean, of course, right? Like, I don't get offended by really anything, especially people trying to, use the blockchain for probably one of its most important use cases, which is capital formation. I do believe in raising funds to execute on, community goods. So I'm not too offended by them doing that. They do have a useful website, and if they're trying to expand their operating capital in order to make it better and do growth efforts, truly, that's good. I don't, and if they're trying to sell the website, it's a business decision, and that's their decision to make. It's it's your site, it's your choice. Much like if it's your keys, it's your choice to decide if you want to participate or not. But no, I don't get triggered, and I reckon, people can respond. You can respond however you want, but yeah, I do not get triggered by things like that at all. It's kind of funny to see people do get triggered. It wouldn't be risk-free rate, more like the discount rate. Maybe. Maybe there's a more accurate description. I think risk-free rate does make sense because it describes what you would earn if you did the risk-free thing, which was staking. But maybe there's other terms that are more accurate in that description. Also, honestly, do you think it's a safe bet that RH won't show his face in the live stream again until Z's trade with the sack money is back into profit and not underwater? Chat will eat him alive for it. You can think of a million reasons why he's not showing his face live. Maybe he got a nose job that doesn't look so good, or maybe he got lip implants. Who knows? Truly. I don't think that's the underwater ETH trade is like probably the least of, because it's like that's something that he experienced. Probably the thing that the chat would eat him alive for was like the billions of dollars of losses experienced so far since Pulse Chain launched across all assets. So that's probably the thing that, and I mean realistically, like he just may be done with it. Like when you're getting that when you're that age, how old is he? And like you've captured hundreds of millions of dollars, would you still be as hungry as you were? So there's probably other reasons. I don't think it's because of the ETH trade. Optimal Timeline says keep innovating. Dipcatcher, we're here for it. Thank you. That I will. 5555. Can Flex Chain have poker? How many blocks do we get to take a turn? Yeah, it absolutely can. So I think what you're asking in that second part about it is like the confirmation thing, like how many blocks until a block is considered valid. With the L2 is just kind of the way the sequencers work. I do believe that there's a very low risk of fraudulent transactions in that format. Because usually what you're worried about is like other validators you may be playing against. And so you have to wait for more confirmation. I'll get a solid answer. A lot of these questions about kind of like these specific, nuances of the risk profile of an L2. All of that will be published, and I don't want to give incomplete or inaccurate answers, but I think on the L2s, they're like that's a core premise is that like the finality is quite fast, so you don't have to wait like 96 transactions to like trust that the move that your opponent made was valid. Calling out Pulse Chain for being late to the L1 trade whilst building yet another L2 seems a little hypocritical, especially now there's a concerted effort to focus more on ETH L1 by the EF. Yeah, I mean, they're trying to scale the L1 because the L2s are becoming popular. And so that's part of it. And and if L1 is scaling, then like that doesn't like take away from this. Like the core value proposition, at least from like a HEX user's perspective, is that that there's a chain for HEX. Especially now as a concerted effort. Yeah, and I mean, you can. Here's the thing, like when you're trying to solve a big problem, you can frame the problem, right? So like framing the, just like generally what Pulse Chain is, like, yeah, of course, like you frame things in a way that makes your solution, make sense, right? Like that's like sales and marketing 101. Welcome to Dipcatcher School of Business. Frame the problem in support of your solution. Thanks for asking. And also, I mean, the L2 not have like this one not having like probably where it matters more. So I'd say was that if you're trying to bootstrap a new token related to an L2, that's probably where the ETH L1 can impact it more. But like these L2s, like especially with like these custom gas tokens, are really made to be kind of hubs for communities and hubs for app chains. So you can kind of, the other kind of term that people in the space use is app chain. So you can think about this like an app chain for HEX. And that's where, like while this one is going to be basically like a standard L2 rollup built using the Arbitrum stack, there is flexibility for expansion or different types of implementations to roll out. So there's other benefits other like the low cost. Like I don't even really talk about the cheap fees or fast transactions because that's basically table stakes. It's really more about the other aspects. What's the block time for FlexNet? So the block time for FlexNet will be about 10 seconds. But with some of these other, like, there are a lot of innovations going on, like this thing called the G2 sequencer, and things like that can like drastically scale the performance, which is useful. Like a lot of rollups that are based around like gaming applications, or I think some of like the high frequency trading applications like Hyperliquid, they may be using some of these more kind of advanced consensus models, which can make those block times be like 1 or 2 seconds. Can you tell me 1 minute? Talk to me like I'm 12. What design I'm buying if I buy this NFT? So if you buy the ownership unit NFT, you get a share of 4 different revenue streams from the operation of FlexNet. So one is the sequencer fees. That is for the, that's basically the gas fees. So it's, in a way, it's kind of like you're acting like a validator. 2, Flex DEX. That is a new type of DEX, which combines the ERC20 token contract with the launchpad with a DEX all in one contract. Big innovation, solves a lot of problems, de-risks the act of high-risk early-stage token trading, and solves some user experience problems as well. So there's a liquidity fee that's involved with that that goes to the FlexNet ownership unit holders. And then you also get bonuses from fundraising. A big part of, to make a successful blockchain, it's basically like a business that sells blocks. And so fundraising is a big aspect of this. And so if you're a holder of one, you get, bonuses on successful funding efforts. And that's to align the existing owners with, fundraising efforts. And then one that's, like the incubator program, if there's like, so that one is probably a little bit more not as like direct, and relies on successful things incubated through our program. But if there's types of like equity shares or different types of deals with incubator participants, potential revenues and proceeds from those projects can make their way there. So 4 revenue sources if you hold those. The NFT is not transferable, and this is to fully align the people who the success of the network. That's one of the problems that I see with like Pulse and PulseX is that so much money went into those, which should have been like an operating budget, which really hasn't been. And then 2, it kind of puts those holders at odds with everything else on the network because those are directly competing for liquidity and demand. And so making this a non-transferable NFT, which at some point will convert into a liquid token, but just not like in the bootstrapping phase of the network. When it's really important to be fully aligned with all ecosystem projects. That's how that NFT works. So financial term for marketing would be the discount rate, not the risk-free rate. HEX still carries smart contract liquidity and market risk factors the risk-free asset like T-bill does not possess. Well, I wouldn't say that there's the smart contract risk. Because you can validate for yourself and prove to yourself. So maybe like there's perhaps uncertainty with like the state of the network, which maybe factors in that. But I don't really capture that. And the liquidity market. So when I say risk-free rate, when you're measuring your performance in HEX, like your HEX on HEX yield, whatever you get for like a 1-year HEX stake, measured in HEX, like that's the risk-free rate. So so there is risk in that, but like for the sake of this, like the HEX on HEX yield is why I like risk-free rate. But I'll use the discount rate's a good one too. Any term that you can drop to make yourself sound smarter, I think is a good thing. Like instead of saying like buy the dip, say something like the risk is mispriced or something like that. HEX is HEX. Let's go. Gotta go. But Hedron is cool, even though liquidity low. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the extensions upon HEX, I think, were really hurt by kind of the inflationary effect of Pulse Chain. I mean, those things were really running prior to Pulse Chain launch. I remember Hedron ran like 20x or so at one point. Yeah. I really hope I've talked to Alex a little bit about, I've kind of introduced the concept of FlexNet to him. I really want to see how he can get involved. He's so smart, and I feel a strong camaraderie with him. Kind of like the whole Poly thing, like that really boosted my like just how I view him. Like he's really awesome, really generous, and I really respect him and everything that he's built. So I think he would be a great participant in the FlexNet ecosystem. So those are all the questions in the chat here. Let's see if I have any on Twitter that we can talk about, and then we have the automated Pulse AI says, excited to see where this goes. Quote this. Come ask questions. So here, I'm gonna I'll pull up some charts or something. Let's see how much of these, see where we're at with the ownership units. So far about 125K has been raised by 108 holders. Let's pop this one into the pretty good distribution. I mean, we have this guy who's reached out to me and told me who he was. Got 260 of them. He has like $17,000 deposited. So at the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8 people have contributed half. And then, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's 6 people with 3 digits of these units. So that's pretty awesome. Those guys are Chads. And then we have a lot of people. So it only shows the top 100, but so there's like what? I'll extend here. Okay, there we go. 108 people. So how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's see, 108. It's fine. So 83, 93, 103. So 25 people have done 1. 83 to 69. So about 13 people have bought 2. 6 people bought 3. 6 people bought 4. About 12 people bought 5. 3 people bought 6. 2 people bought 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people bought 10. 14, 15, 15, 16. Or about 20. Yeah. So thank you to everyone who's participated in this so far. Here we can let's talk about how what's going on here, and maybe I'll go into more. So here we'll share this tab instead. So quadruple income streams, sequencer fees, Flex Dex LP fees, incubator, and fundraising bonuses. So right now, so the testnet, I was going to launch it on Friday. It's ready to launch. I have everything ready to basically just hit go. But some people expressed to me that they would like at least the weekend. So now it's seeming like this is going to launch on Monday, just because I want people to get in at this rate here. So currently it's $50 per unit. Once testnet goes live, these ownership units are going to be $100 per unit. And then once mainnet is live, then they're going to be $200 per unit. So, a couple of weeks to get involved. And so I'm very pleased with how much has actually come in so far. And so, you have some time, and also, I mean, some people maybe, it's like as is right now, it's vaporware. So it's like max risk probably, then once testnet phase occurs, then a little bit less risk. And once mainnet happens, there'll be, even less risk. So probably going to be, I'd say that these will probably increase over time. Something else that was announced is we're doing just like a little sweepstakes, where people can get the like if we're going to draw 6 winners, and one of those 6 people is going to get their ownership units doubled. 2 people are going to get it increased by 50%, and then 3 people are going to get increased by 25%. So just like a little bonus for anyone who participates. So the odds are better if I guess the more you've purchased, your odds are a little better, because it's based on the unit. It's not based on address. It's based on units. And so that's something we announced today. What up? What up? Should open up buying ownership units on Pulse Chain. Good idea. I was going back and forth on if that is worth it, but I think that like potential outrage is probably a good marketing technique, and just kind of meeting people where they're at. So it's a good idea. Quite a good idea. Let's talk about FlexDex. A revolutionary token standard that bridges the gap between launchpads and decentralized exchanges. So there's kind of 2 pieces to it. One is the launch mechanism, and one is the built-in liquidity pools. So the launch mechanism, it solves a couple problems. One, it bootstraps liquidity for a new token, and 2, it eliminates things like snipers and just makes the launch of these things a little bit more fair. And so the reason why it eliminates snipers is that it opens up for a period where 80% of the supply is distributed equally to people who deposit flex, which is simply wrapped HEX into the contract. So that's like that's the initial supply allocation. So there's no like benefit to being first. And then those funds are split up into 2 sections. One just goes into a liquidity pool, which actually lives inside the token contract itself. So, about 20% of the deposits and 20% of the supply go into the liquidity pool. And then the trading just starts from there. But then the remaining 80% of the deposits go to something called a price floor. So the price floor is basically a buy and burn that's executed at about 26% below the minting rate. And that buy and burn is equipped to purchase and burn 100% of the issued supply through that launch mechanism. And so when it buys it, if say you exercise the price floor, you're basically burning your token and then redeeming the flex that's sitting in that price floor. And so it's equipped to buy back all of the supply. So there will be some supply left in the liquidity pool, but that the only reason that price could get to the price floor is if the liquidity pool is also down there. And so there's always a little bit of liquidity available to run it back, which I think is pretty interesting, because not every coin has by now, meme coins, they're kind of ephemeral, meaning they're here for a week and then it's the world kind of moves on to the next thing. And so this helps to de-risk that situation a little bit, because instead of turning into a race where like the first guy out gets most of the gain and then like everyone else gets almost nothing, everyone gets some meaningful amount. Um, and so it massively de-risks, like, buying one of these assets. And it also introduces some other dynamics, because um, if you know that the contract is always equipped to buy back and burn your coins from you at a certain rate, it's fixed. If you bought like slightly above it, your max loss is only there, because if, like, say it goes down, then you can just sell back into the price floor, and then your loss was capped at whatever the difference was between when you purchased and what the price floor rate was. So it almost introduces like a whole new, like, coins that kind of run their course, and like the original cohort of people who moved on. It actually opens up a brand new, like, kind of like a new way for community takeovers to take place, where you can kind of run it back and take on very little risk in doing so. So I think a lot of interesting dynamics can come about from this type of like liquidity pool plus price floor model, which I mean, really, like, I think that probably the main reason to buy, and this kind of goes back to this person's question about the ownership unit NFTs, probably the main reason to buy them is FlexDex, to be honest. That's kind of what I think. And so that's like the launch mechanism, kind of like a de-risk launch system. But then also it has, having the liquidity pool live inside the token contract has other benefits as well, such as where you can buy and sell directly to the contract, which means you don't actually have to do that annoying approval step. The approval thing is somewhat getting resolved in EIP 7702, which I've talked about a lot lately. Or it's just kind of moving into a different user experience to do the approval. You still have to basically like enable it once, but once you enable it, then it works forever. So this solves a really big problem with just like that approval step for both buying and selling. Like, there's no approval because you're trading with the contract. And then also it has limit orders baked in. So in addition to just like the standard symmetric AMM pool, there's limit orders in this, which can be useful for both people who are just buying and selling, or people who are providing liquidity. Because if you're providing liquidity within constant product AMM symmetrical position, which effectively mean, like, when you're providing liquidity in a normal like V2 liquidity pool, you're effectively buying and selling at all prices, which may not always be the optimal strategy. It is the good strategy if you expect price to kind of remain stable, or if price goes in one direction, you expect it to come back. So being able to supplement that with just straight limit orders, I think can actually be a big breakthrough for liquidity providers as well, where they can kind of balance out the risk. Say you have like your standard liquidity position that's kind of spanning like a range, like that, and then you expect price to trade within here for most of the time, but then maybe you put like a buy order out here and a sell order out here, so that if price goes beyond your predicted range, then you can like be more, like, have more weight, either long or short, depending on where it is in that range. So that I think is a big innovation as well. Does it matter about the HEX price for the gas price as we go up or down? So slightly, more so in the sense of like what the baseline gas fee is, because, like, for instance, the way that the gas fee that the user pay is calculated is the total number of gas units consumed by your transaction times the market price for each gas unit at the time. And so a baseline transaction costs 21,000 units of gas. Like, if you're just sending ETH, it costs 21,000 units of gas. And then the and then that times whatever the gas price is that you see on your scan is like what you pay. And so, so increasing hex price does impact that, but that kind of gets normalized versus the just demand for the chain. Like a high hex price alone won't cause the gas fees to be shockingly high. The thing that really drives the price is the demand for the chain. And so if you're worried about gas price going up because of the hex price, then like you won't really care so much, because if you're participating in the network, then you will have already owned the hex, because you wrapped it up into the flex contract and you bridge it over, so you benefit from that. And then also, if you're worried about the main cause of gas going up is just high consumption of blocks and high demand for the blocks. If you're worried about that, then let me try to get my there we go. So if you're worried about that, then maybe consider getting the flexnet ownership units. So then you would Pulse Jitsu with Fast Abdul says, I'm here for the tech. Well, the tech is here for you. Might get on a stream, I think, next week with Abdul. Wow, I wonder how many live viewers there are, because Twitter, I think, like, it only goes up, like, even if someone stops watching. So if you're actually watching on Twitter, put a flex emoji in the live chat, so I want to count how many people are actually actively watching right now on Twitter. If you're on Twitter watching, reply with the flex emoji so I can count how many people are watching. It says 617 viewers, but I don't think it's that many. I think it's maybe total number of people who have opened up who opened this up. So let's see. Do we need a certain amount of hex to be bridges in to create enough available gas for the chain? Does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, well, gas is only like, it's consumed on a per transaction basis, and so like you always can have enough gas, because like it has to exist in the first place, I guess. There's not a minimum amount needed. But good question. Most of the people here are just my alt accounts. Yeah, me too. Whenever you see someone like, shit talking gophers, it's actually me from my alt. Wow, no live Twitter viewers. There's 630. All the people in the comments here are on YouTube. Put your static here. I'm going to tweet this link out on YouTube. You said earlier the price floor opens up a new price protection for tokens. Is this only for HEX or asset? No, so it's only for tokens launched on FlexDex. And it's just because of how the issuance works, where there's like a liquidity bootstrapping phase, which issues the initial supply of the coin, and then the majority of that liquidity that's pooled in that bootstrapping phase goes into the price floor. So that is for it can only work for assets that are deployed in this manner. Which makes me think it could be like the new standard for asset issuance. Interesting enough, this was actually something I built months ago, and the original name was bounce.fun, and that was a like kind of describing that premise of the price floor, where it could like just bounce off that thing and just keep running. Because if it hits the price floor, that means that like people who would have been active sellers are now, they burnt their coins and they're gone. And it makes like a risk-free trade for anyone. Like if you buy 1% above the price floor, then your max loss is 1%, because you can always just redeem at the price floor. And so like new buyers may enter in that, like, you know, whatever you would assume is like the max possible like risk to take on a trade. Like if you're like implementing like a long-standing like lot of swings at bat, like say you're trying to like trade $1,000 a day to try to grow your account. Whatever your max possible loss that you're willing to just filter for coins that are like, say you don't want to lose more than 4% in any day ever. You could simply just buy coins that are 4%. You place a limit order at 4% on the coins that are trading right there, and then your max possible loss is 4%. My end stakes are left liquid for any taking profit opportunities. Pulse Hex end stakes are compounded. Rocket Red, countdown, liftoff. Yeah, it's a good strategy. This is the ground zero of making history. Best projects launch before the aggressive part of the bull. Koki says Bounce is still such a great brand. Yeah, it really is. Let me see if I can pull it up. Yeah, this is it. So yeah, we have these coin cards, coin page, your deposits, tokens mintable, create coin. Yeah. Bounce not fun. Don't show to the jack. Let me see if I can pull up the spreadsheet. 1 second. Let me just try to pull this up so I can reference that particular. So I'm looking at a spreadsheet right now. I want to share this. Okay, so let's kind of the one that I had kind of settled on was because this is just to kind of simulate the different like configurations that are possible. Ideally, has a standard launch. You're able to kind of compare head to head more easily, and just like less things for users to think about. So this one right here is kind of where I've settled. So 80% of the supply goes to the like people who deposit in that liquidity bootstrapping phase, and then 20% of them go into the liquidity pool. And then say this is like 1 billion. This was all centered around Pulse. So maybe let's knock, I don't know, maybe knock a 0 off of this, or maybe, yeah, maybe 2 zeros. Oh, it's view only. Okay, just imagine this is units, like this, just 1 billion units of HEX. And then, so here the cost basis is like 1.25 units per HEX deposited. There is like a value here, the LP markup, kind of got rid of that when thinking about this. And so, so a quarter of the units go into the liquidity pool, and then 75% of them are outside. And so in this setting, your max loss is about 25%. And the price floor value is like 0.93 relative to 0.125, if I'm correct. And so like your max loss, if you participate in this, is about 25%. So Bounce.ass would be a pretty funny branding. Ugh, that'd be illegal in most states. What happened to Gophers? I mean, kind of the same thing happens to every meme coin. People are into it for a little bit, and then they stop, and then they move on to the next thing. So it's still highly liquid everywhere. Probably too much liquidity, to be honest, but it's burnt, especially on Solana. But yeah, I mean, it went the course of a normal meme coin. See if anyone's asking any questions on Twitter. I don't think the Twitter live chat is working. Big Brain DeFi says, keep building, King. Thank you. Got a lot of new viewers on YouTube. So here, why don't we just run it back with what we were talking about? Let me see. Let's talk about this concept. So there are two big forces are combining to rocket boost HEX on Ethereum to new heights. One, sudden HEX rate slashing causing massive disinflation and massive change in the risk-free rate in HEX. This will unlock a wave of innovation that did not exist in the prior high-rate environment. This was 3 years into an oversold downtrend pulse chain. Now that so much supply has recirculated and the overhead resistance was ported to other markets, HEX is primed for high performance, similar to how it was December of 2020. And when I say that sources of overhead resistance was ported to other markets, what I mean by that is that usually in a market, when you look at a chart, when people buy the top, they turn into resistance the next, if price goes down and then price starts going back up. Those people that bought the top are looking to sell near where they were to cut their losses. And so top buyers usually turn into sellers at or near those levels. But since so much of the HEX supply was bought to sacrifice, the buy energy went into HEX, but then the sell energy came out on the other side in Pulse and PulseX. So like what would normally be really high resistance from those levels on hex, those sellers now have pulse and pulse X. So um, like something that would otherwise be a massive source of resistance is just gone. And the whole time that hex was in a downtrend, it was in that high rate, high inflation environment. Now it's not. And kind of the last kind of portion of the down move in hex on Ethereum has been related to kind of a half-ass effort to try to get people to migrate, which I mean, what's the ratio between let's go to Dex Screener. I mean, even let's see, HEX versus hex. Let's see what this ratio is. Yeah, I mean, since that tweet, the market has decided that hex on Pulse Chain is the real hex. The ratio is around 0.6. It's currently at 0.35. It got as low as 0.1. So there's kind of artificial efforts to try to make everyone switch over to Pulse Chain, which my conspiracy theory is that Richard wasn't in control of his Twitter account at that time. I think he's smarter than that. Like trying to move everything to like a chain that has $40 million of stablecoin deposits. Like that's insane. So I don't think that was actually him. I think he had he hired someone to manage his Twitter account, and they probably just didn't know what they're talking about. So, kind of these things, like the reason I bring up that is that there were things where like that have caused hex to be artificially low, like external factors, lawsuit too, like these external things not related to the supply and demand trading on the chart that caused it to be so low. And you can look back in history, times where like Bitcoin was artificially low when there was that, what was it called, Plus token, that like kind of Chinese Ponzi scheme at the like very tail end of the bear market. It like just yoinked down from like 6,000 to 3,000, and that kind of set it up to go on its run to 69K in that run. So there's a time where Bitcoin has been artificially low due to kind of external factors, and like Solana was artificially low in 2021 or 2022 as a result of the FTX situation. And that's like what kind of gave it energy to the upside. When there was like a new wave of use cases, new wave of demand, it had a really high impact. So that's kind of like the setup that Hex is in right now. So other than that, the Ethereum's latest network upgrade is expanding the capacity of mainnet and L2s while introducing groundbreaking user-facing features with EIP 7702. At the same time, billions of dollars of VC funding has gone into supporting infrastructure centered around L2 interoperability and performance. This enables groundbreaking community empowerment tools such as custom gas tokens for L2s, instant bridging via cross-protocol, for example, and more user-facing benefits. The combination of HEX being primed for high markup and being integrated by FlexNet into the powerful Ethereum infrastructure that has been deployed the last 2 years allows the rising tide of Ethereum, which has gone through its own period of being artificially low, to directly amplify HEX. It's simple. There are large tailwinds on Ethereum for HEX to leverage. Flex is putting up the sails. It's kind of what's depicted in this image that I created. It's pretty amazing. I made this with about 2 prompts in ChatGPT. It's trying to show like a ship that didn't have sails. It couldn't get that right, but like a ship that didn't have sails up, shooting cannonballs at another ship that did have sails up, that were, filled up by the wind. So like in this case, like Ethereum is the wind, maybe the ocean, you could consider that to be pulse chain. And then like this boat represented by the PLS logo is shooting cannonballs at HEX. But it's got its sails up, the flexnet sails, like the green HEX. And, we are pushing forward. Because so much has happened. Like, that's the thing, is that, like, Ethereum, the network, is sometimes at odds with Ethereum, the asset. But so the last 2 years have been massive breakthroughs for Ethereum, the network, but it's underperformed as an asset. And so people, I think, kind of overlook some of those breakthroughs. But those breakthroughs like benefit the things that are built on Ethereum. And Pulse Chain is still on effectively the same version. There haven't been meaningful Pulse Chain updates since it launched, like to Pulse Chain, the network. There have been new front ends hosted on IPFS. There have been some small things done to PulseX, and there's been pump.fun. So there have been things more like the application layer, but nothing related to the network. So the network is not maintaining pace with the Ethereum upgrades. And they claim, this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, that Ethereum's the testnet for Pulse Chain. It's like, no, the Ethereum testnet is the testnet for Ethereum. And, it's kind of funny. It's funny when you see people that repeat that, you know that they are just not experts, basically. Just funny. So, Ethereum has been moving forward, and they've committed to whether you can make the argument whether or not the L2 model for scaling is best. There's pros and cons to it, but Hex on Ethereum is the only one that actually benefits from that. And Hex on Ethereum is the only one that benefits from the overweight, like the Pulse and PulseX sacrifice. So basically, like, just two huge fat lumps imagine, as you see someone just, they reach out, they stand up and they reach, grabbing something with their hands up, and then these have these two massive fat lumps hanging out of their t-shirt that then knock over everything on the desk. That's kind of like Pulse and PulseX, like just super overweight, heavy things because of the economic dynamics of the launch. And if you weigh 400 pounds, it probably takes years and years and years to lose that weight. And that's kind of what has to happen naturally. And so the only thing that actually benefited from Pulse and PulseX, the thing that created those two massive fat lumps hanging out under the t-shirt, were the Pulse and PulseX sacrifice. And the majority of that was in HEX deposits. And so the net result was that HEX got burnt. And then Pulse and PulseX created supply at way too high of a valuation with no cap and no market dynamic and no market structure forming. Whereas HEX got market structure everywhere. So HEX has legitimate market structure at all times. It was massively deflationary due to the Pulse and PulseX sacrifice. And then most recently, it's become even further disinflationary as a result of the rate cutting moves. So these problems that were created by Pulse Chain existing, the only thing that kind of remains out of that is HEX. And most of the damage to HEX has already been done. So you want to buy things where the damage has already been done, not things that are still kind of fighting through their own problems. That realization is really why I believe that the thing to focus on is HEX on Ethereum, because you want to buy things that are artificially low. You want to buy things that the crowd is not fully in favor of. You want to buy things that are close to the on-ramps. You want to buy things that can leverage investments that other people have made, such as the L2 infrastructure. And you want to buy things that show resilience, and that's what HEX on Ethereum has done. So it's actually a true no-brainer Um, or RH via Godwill, his alt account, donate the bank HEX. He consistently dumps every bounce without touching away, pumps around to test water, does back to hedge selling via bank HEX to super time. No, I don't believe that he's Godwill. Not a chance. But bank HEX sell, like that's really nothing. Like, what did they start with? Like 800 million units. There's really no difference between one person selling 800 million units or 10 people selling 80 million units or 100 people selling 8 million units or 1,000 people selling 800,000. Like, it's literally, there's truly no difference. There's more than 8 people selling 10 million units or 100 million units. Like, there's more than that. So like, one concentrated seller isn't like something to be afraid of. I think that like that in particular, like when people cite like BankX seller, like in general, like just to try to just go along with like, oh, PHEX is the real hex, hex is hex classic, like all that shit. A lot of signs of just like general mental weakness, where like they outsource their own critical thinking to someone else, and like fear of someone who owns coins selling. Like, all coins are valid to be sold at any time, no matter who owns them. And so like there's signs of like mental weakness that you see emerge in some of the arguments against Hex on Ethereum. And I think it's better to align with things where like the arguments in favor of them signal mental strength. And I think that like the things that people like about Hex on Ethereum, they signal mental strength, not mental weakness. Mental weakness meaning like appeal to authority, like, oh, the founder said this, Richard said that, the market decided, like that. Like if you just fall in line with that, like that's just sign of mental weakness. And but if you have the audacity to say, I like both, and where you're not swayed by just like the words of someone who's like really not active anymore, that's a sign of mental strength. And so I think that you can see there's clear personality differences, based around people who, kind of what side of this they're on. It's kind of interesting. It's like, I like both, right? Because you have long stakes, then you care about both. But I think that the one that's going to drive the most growth is the one that's undervalued, been suppressed, already had years of it getting its ass kicked, and then is in position to capitalize on major improvements on Ethereum. Like, truly no brainer. But some people don't have a brain, and so how could you pick up on a no brainer? There's a word for that. It starts with an R. What is that word? Maybe audacity really is underrated. Touche. Yeah, like you have to like these things are zero-sum games, and like not everyone can win, and so you want to go against people that have that show signs of losing. So it's not even really being audacious. It's really more like, okay, the lemmings follow one thing. How can we capitalize on their misjudgment? Rhymes with me farted. Oh, regarded. That's it. Win testnet. So I was going to launch it on Friday, but people have asked me to give them a couple extra days because they want to lock in the $50 rate. So I think Monday. Everything's ready to launch. Like I can launch right now on stream, but people earnestly asked me to extend it, and I think 2 weeks of the current rate is fine. It's a long. I mean, this is a long road. Like this, so doing testing on Monday that make hardly any difference. How sick is the FlexNet green? God, you guys should see the before and after of like the version of the site that I sent the GitHub link to Goldkey versus what he sent back. Like, oh my God. Like this color is perfect. And the way it merges with like the hex gradient when you just apply this like green filter to it is just perfect. So I'm very, very satisfied with FlexNet. Will you incorporate the perps and maxi into FlexNet? Yeah. So that's kind of the like if Flex is basically just like wrapped hex on FlexNet, then the way you would stake your Flex is to just simply buy bridged over perps and maxi. So that's kind of like, kind of base level of integration is that like working on incentive systems that encourage people to bridge over perps and maxi to make them available as liquidity on FlexNet so that people can, if you want, like maybe there'll be a website like stake your Flex, and then you like click stake and you click how long you want to do it. And then what that'll do is it'll kind of be an aggregator for the stake pool tokens that gets you, puts you in like say you want to stake for 7 years. Maybe what that'll do is it'll buy some Lucky at a discount, and maybe the discounts with like some discounted trio and discounted base or something. So that's a piece of it, a piece of like kind of treating this as an extension of hexes, because like the hex staking, like that has to take place on the Ethereum mainnet. Something that I want to see is because like there's so much cross-chain interoperability infrastructure now that didn't exist even like a year ago, or at least not to the scale it does today. And I mentioned a cross protocol. Like there are solutions that could look like this, where you deposit hex into a contract on Ethereum, and then it instantly mints you a token on FlexNet that's actively traded, and then the stake lives on the Ethereum network, obviously. But then when it ends, when it like the proceeds, like the principal and the yield, are distributed on FlexNet as Flex. So kind of like a way where you can like kind of like almost like stake and bridge the hex. So that's things like that are a possibility with this like L2 infrastructure. But like a lot of these, like kind of the like when I've studied this stuff more, it appears that some of the big user-facing problems they're trying to solve is the like, because there's numerous chains and there's liquidity kind of fragmented across numerous chains. How can you create systems that make it so that the user doesn't feel like they're on numerous chains, or maybe like the user's interacting with chains that they don't even know that they're interacting with. And so there's been a lot of work in this like cross-chain interoperability space that like by being like a standard L2, you just get to tap into. Either if you're a standard L2, you can tap into it, or if you're an L1 that has like professional business development people who work on partnerships and integrations full time. That's the other way that you get that. That's something that I wish would happen with PulseChain. Like, how come there's like no one with a pulsechain.com email address that can like work on this stuff? Like a zillion anon accounts just berating the social media intern on Twitter to try to get integrations or something like that. This really does nothing. It does the opposite, actually. But like real professionals who have networks, who have, you know, real skill to do this stuff. It's like, why didn't that get invested in? Like, why was the investment made in ETH at 3,800 and not in business development professionals to help get PulseChain integrated with the broader blockchain space? Guess we'll never know. What else? I guess other reasons, other proof points why HEX on Ethereum is what matters. Sacrifice address had $650 million in stablecoins. They bought ETH. Probably because ETH is a better investment. And it's like, and maybe that's a sign that, like, you know, maybe with like your words, you can say like, oh, PulseChain is the best. ETH is PulseChain's testnet. But with actions, especially actions that can result in profit and loss, which asset was bought? What's funny, another way to think about it is that when the sacrifice address was buying ETH, Vitalik and the ETH Foundation are actively selling, and they sell to fund work on Ethereum. So in a way, the sacrifice for PulseChain and PulseX funded Ethereum development. Didn't fund Pulse and PulseX development. That's funny. What's crazy is that I had sent, there's an account on TradingView that says Richard Hart win. I assume it's him. It could be some, I mean, there's really no way to tell. I'd sent them the dip catcher algorithm. And if you look at the dip catcher algorithm at the time of those purchases, it was actually in the sell zone on the weekly chart. It hits that sell zone basically like once a cycle. There's like nowhere near any buy zone. It only recently hit the buy zone. What a shame. Respect the dip catcher for not being afraid to speak truth on Pulse, even when it might be unpopular. Yeah, I mean, tired of losing. It was awesome when HEX was winning. 2019 through 2022, HEX was winning. And ever since then, it's been losing, and I'm tired of it. And also, I think that like a lot of people are not willing to because they're afraid of losing followers or like losing like social credibility. But that doesn't really happen. I mean, I do lose followers sometimes, but like I don't care. It's like a lot of people like have built their kind of like social foundation around just being a cheerleader, and I have not built my social foundation around being a cheerleader. I've built it around being a competitor, and I have a strong desire to win. And I want to align with people that have a strong desire to win. Let's find another. There's another tweet that speaking of like desire to win. Let's pull this up. Where's that tweet? Did it get deleted? Oh, here it is. FlexNet is for Hexicans who have a deep natural drive to win. Those who oppose FlexNet, saying things like Pulse Chain is perfect as it is, and once ETH pumps, Arch will pump us, haven't had the drive to win since they had a wiggly tail and were swimming up their mother's pipes. That is so true. Like, a lot of people just do not have the urge to win. And I do. So that is why sometimes what I say is not popular, but I'd say a lot. I mean, like, people's general response, like, because the things that I say, like, I try to avoid just making shit up. A lot of times people just make shit up, which is fine. Like, truly, I have no problem with people lying. Like, lying is a key piece of internet life. Like, lies online, like, that's like what the internet's all about. It's just lies. And especially in financial markets, you should never expect people who are your competitors in zero-sum financial markets to tell you the truth. No one owes you the truth, ever. So, like, you know, I don't get offended by people lying, but I do try to maintain solid truth in things that I say and do. And so, like, you know, most of the things that I like, any criticism that I have are like kind of rooted in things that are like true and can be measured. And so, like, it's kind of hard, like, you know, people then try to like deflect, like, you know, like, I'll say something about like Pulse Chain and PulseX sacrifice model, you know, it creates potentially impossible to overcome headwinds. And people will try to, like, the only thing they can say is like, oh, well, Gophers sucks too. I'm like, yeah, like, Gophers was on Solana was modeled after those things, because at the time, you know, the it was above sac price, everything actually seemed like it was going well. And that's, I think, why I'm so in tune with this problem, is that, like, you know, you can see it happen on a massive scale with the Pulse and PulseX sacrifice, and then you can see it on a small scale with the Gophers on Solana launch. So, like, these problems, like, these are things that, like, I'm so, like, and people like try to divert, and it's like all they can say, when it's like, okay, like, I'm more critical and objective about that topic than they are. So it's like people just try to divert, and I think a lot of people live vicariously through Richard. Like, if you say something that's like not like just like glazing cheerleader type of rhetoric, they feel like you're insulting them, which is really odd. And so, and you know, like, same with like the lawsuit, like, you know, excellent, like, it's I'm so thankful that he won, but I don't treat that as my own lawsuit that I won, but a lot of people kind of do. So that's usually like the opposition that it gets. But I think that a lot of times, like, things that I say end up being like taken as more consensus opinion later on. But then it's usually Gold Key is actually the one who I think is like the even further leading indicator of that. Like, a lot of the sentiment that I feel like I have, he'll voice those things to me months or even sometimes years in advance, and then people get really triggered by things that he says as well. And so, like, it's kind of like I'd say he's always on the kind of the cutting edge of sentiment, I think. And then a lot of that stuff kind of bubbles up and kind of becomes consensus view later on. It's kind of interesting to see. No, you just tweet too much and had to dig for it. We have view full to Ethereum scales throughput. I talked about risks by the SEC, how it tests, and so on. So things are. And I guess my commitment is commitment to natural law and operating in good faith. So that is what I will continue to do. And we've already seen that like trying to like jump around with just like weird semantics and like just bullshit that didn't alleviate any of the headache. And so I will commit to operating in good faith, operating transparently, and operating within the natural law. So that's kind of how I approach that too. (1,029 viewers. We have 19 people on YouTube, and I wish it would just say how many actual live viewers there are. A shame. What else should we talk about? Someone asked, Golki asked me, why Arbitrum Orbit over OP Stack? That is because of a custom gas token functionality. Yeah, that's purely why. This has a chance to be like the biggest custom gas token deployment ever on these L2s. Other communities have done it, but we're definitely the biggest. Like this has a real chance to really break through. There's a site called rollup.wtf. So this shows kind of the different networks and rollups. So I guess this is like a way to see. So these networks are using more mega gas per second than Ethereum. So you want to be up here. You want your chain to be used more than, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of bullshit ones like yada 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 yada. I mean, Degen was one that we hoped had been big last year, but then that just kind of fizzled out. Ape Chain, that's like a custom gas token one too. Pepe Unchained, that's probably one as well. Ink is Krakens. Unichain is Uniswaps. That'd be sick if FlexNet was bigger than Uniswap's chain. I mean, really, the dominant one is Base, and that's OP Stack, OP Stack. So these are the ones that are kind of more related to. Okay, so maybe Pepe Unchained isn't. If it is OP Stack, that means it's not. So you want to look at Arb Nitro. Yeah, here we go. Because these are the ones that are like more similar to this. Settlement, yeah. So we will be one that is Arb Nitro settling to Ethereum. So let's see. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. yeah, so there are 5 of these networks that settle to that are Arbitrum stack. AnyTrust. So I mean, yeah, if you're doing like kind of work, AnyTrust is the data availability layer for Arbitrum stack. And then, yeah, most of them do settle to Arbitrum, but because of custom gas, we will be settling to Ethereum. I mean, it's a real chance to really break through. And there's like a lot of like the whole Ethereum industry wants to, they want successful L2s. So, you know, that category of user probably didn't have positive views of HEX in the past, but now is a chance for that. So, yeah. Well, thanks for everyone who's tuning in today. I am going to hop off now, get back to it. I really appreciate everyone. Thank you, everyone who is FlexNet owner. So far, I mean, 125K. That's more than I thought would come in at this point. I think it's going to only grow as like the testnet and the mainnet start rolling out. So thank you, everyone. Had a really good time today. We'll talk to you all soon. Have fun. Last thing, Hex Geode says, I like the name FlexNet. The only other name I would suggest is Hexaco. That would have been sick, honestly. Damn. I guess the opportunity with FlexNet is that because Hex in general has such poor PR around it, that like Flex is kind of a like one layer removed from that a little bit, and then it allows a chance to have established some level of rapport and some level of credibility before it's introduced that it's based on Hex. And then it's really not really about Hex, but it's really more about the Hex community, which is Bitcoin OGs and Ethereum OGs, you know, community dating back to 2019, you know, pioneers of using decentralized exchange, pioneers of yield generating DeFi assets, you know, innovators in the sense of like having attempted to launch a successful L1, big on self-custody, then you kind of lead with those things, not like, you know, the kind of negative things that people in the past have portrayed related to Hex. So that's why Hex was not in the name. But good question, and thank you so much. I'll see you guys.